right. Driven by purpose, powered by tech, digitalization is driving transformation. You know it. I know it. The world is evolving with it, and changing the way customers want to connect with the companies is only becoming interesting with every passing day. The connections with market and the marketeer are getting more meaningful. Trust me, it is. If you are into that field, you will connect to it. And hence, CMOs need to embrace digital change to drive their companies to success and make an impact is need of the hour. Well, new technologies have become a focal point of CMOs. Understanding the use of technology to drive demand and making your brand absolutely meaningful is the way forward. Identifying the purpose in a high impact brand along with meeting real leadership challenges is the way forward. And of course, the 2022 Marketeer Vision Board is the way to go. Joining us in a way forward to a way to go is Ravi, Santhanam, CMO HDFC. Along with them is Bidisha, Nagaraj, CMO Schneider Electric India. Anil, Viswanathan, VP Marketing Mondelez India. Sandeep, Juneja, Vice President Sales and Marketing DHL Express India. Vasuta, Agarwal, MD APAC InMobi. And of course, the session chair is Harsha, Razdan, co-lead Clients and Markets and Sector Lead Consumer Markets and Life Sciences, KPMG India. And Harsha, over to you.
Thank you, Mithun, for the wonderful setup, and welcome panelists, and thank you for joining us. A big welcome to all the audience. You will surely have an interactive session, I promise you that. And the panelists have made it easy for me already by giving me all the freedom. But let me sort of start off here, and I request us to be as interactive as possible. But perhaps I'll start off with Ravi as the first question, and then I'll sort of go around. Ravi, starting off with you, and it was wonderfully set up by Mithun in terms of the topic, the new technologies, and how brands need to have a purpose. How do you sort of mix the two and make sense in terms of consumer interaction? How have you seen the customer journeys change over the last 2 years primarily? How is it different from the past, and how are you learning from it in your current role?
Thanks, Harsha, and good morning to everybody. Good morning to all the people who are there in the call. See, banking is slightly more mature in terms of digital adoption, usage, and we see it as a continuous movement forward from a branch physical to an ATM to a phone banking to an internet banking to a mobile banking, and tomorrow I do believe it will become conversational banking. So it has always been because of the nature of the industry and the lack of a physical product or a service. It's money, right? There is nothing which there's a physicality to this. The physicality is to the branches which build the trust where you put your money in. What the biggest change, I would like to put it in two separate steps. The first step is sales of financial products is slightly more complex. And so the entire sales ecosystem still believed digital is more of a process enabler. So the transaction systems were all anyway digital. 90% of our transactions happen digitally when you do money transfer and those kind of stuff. But the sales of fresh products, it was more sales driven. What pandemic did is made these people cannot meet the customers. So they need to figure a way out of how do I actually interact with this customer when I'm not going to be sitting in front of them and selling the product, whether it is a life insurance, whether it is a car loan, whether it is a home loan. That suddenly changed because they wanted to adopt digital to enable them to sell. So the conversation of this being a process enabler to become a revenue enabler, that's the biggest win for the entire ecosystem in the BFSI. That's from the marketeer side as well as the sales side. From the consumer side, my strong belief is there was a huge demand, supply was not being made available. If people have adopted to digital way of money transfer, people would have adopted to digital way of even applying for a credit card. I think we in the ecosystem never wanted to create that supply. For whatever reasons, the banking ecosystem never created that supply, and there was more physical distribution and all those stuff. And suddenly the supply side started looking at it differently. So what we see is the consumer behavior, and I believe strongly the threshold of irreversibility concept. If a certain way in which you are doing suddenly becomes extremely easy, convenient for you, it is very impossible for you to go back and do it. And if you have to take a personal example, me and my wife works, we decided to move to Big Basket or any of these shopping applications way back. And now that it is convenient, it is highly impossible for us to go back. So the threshold of irreversibility has crossed. So we all hope and pray that more supply will come, and the threshold of irreversibility of applying for a fresh product that you want to buy, like what happens in, say, many of the online commerce world, will also start happening in BFSI. And consumers are ready. I think it's more about marketers trying to understand that the consumers are ready on this side. And now with the sales ecosystem wanting to use more and more because they can't meet the customers physically. So both sides are ready. It's about supply to really kickstart.
Ravi, wonderfully said about supply and demand. Bidisha, let me come over to you. You heard Ravi talking about, and that's the banking side. How are you seeing this? A different kind of business? Have you also seen similar changes, or are there trends you would like to refute or add on to, Ravi?
No, I completely echo Ravi's thoughts. At Schneider, we are in the business of energy management, right? So a large part of our business is B2B and some part of it is B2C. I like to sometimes think about our target audience continuum is from an electrician to a CEO and everybody in between, right? So the entire customer journey, customer experience, digitization, etc., has different things to different people. I mean, we in the last 2.5, 3 years, we've realized that we can't use one formula for all these various people. Now, some of the people, some of our target audiences, who have been digitally savvy, have been open to this transformation, right? Because, in their mindset, they've shifted. So it's helped us start this conversation with them, etc., etc. Because thus far, all conversations or all final impact or influence was happening physically, especially in our business, because we are not selling an FMCG product. We are selling a concept. We are selling people. We're getting people to embrace sustainability, embrace therefore energy management, embrace complex products at multi levels, etc. So a lot of that had to be done over a cup of coffee or tea, because that conversation, and so that's something I have to say we've not been able to replace. However, we've looked at very, very different tools of engagement. We've looked at different tools of influencing. We've looked at digital ways of factory visits, for them to see how things are functioning. It has been a huge transformation, I have to say. But suddenly, the interesting thing is, when Ravi spoke about reversibility, now that things are opening up, I'm seeing suddenly people plunge back into physicality, and I'm like, okay, so what happened? 2.5 years, everything was working so well. We clocked great revenues. We did great influencing. But I personally would like things not to go back, but we're still watching that space. So I'm not 100% sure we have reached the irreversible space yet.
Thank you, Bidisha. I think a wonderful thing around physicality. Anil, coming to FMCG, Bidisha mentioned, and sort of it brings us back to Mondelez, and traditionally a physical setup, you've gone very heavy on digital. How have you changed your business model? Or was it already there the last 2 years? Any thoughts from your side?
Thanks, Harsha. So from banking to energy to chocolate, I guess I think the thing that remains common is the fact that the consumer is definitely spending more time, feeling more comfortable, engaging more often, and consuming more content. So I think definitely looking at ourselves and looking at the wider consumer. I mean, that's definitely changed. It was changing in the past, and COVID has just accelerated the momentum. So to that extent, if you were to think about us as marketers and the brands and the portfolios we manage, we need to be where the consumer is, right? So I think so we've accelerated the change and moved closer to where the consumer is, Harsha. So I think in that sense, the trend has only gotten accelerated. However, I don't think we can ever be comfortable to say it's going to be one versus the other, one channel versus the other. So building on Bidisha's point, it is likely to remain omni-channel. And that's what makes our jobs a bit more trickier, because we have to ensure that we don't look at the consumer journeys differently across different channels. And how do we get a view of the consumer journey across channels at an omni level, and being able to measure and impact it across is what makes life very interesting. I think on one side, what technology and digital is able to do is create engagement like never before. And hence, how we put our brand out there, how do we create those engagement platforms which are meaningful to create long-term sustainable competitive advantage is kind of one challenge. And the other is to kind of look at it at an overall consumer journey. To measure, again, technology and digital is enabling us to measure and be far more scientific than ever before. And then impact through the line. I think those are some of the things that is making life more complex. But the journey is only in one direction, which is more time spent, more comfort, and more consumption.
Thank you, Anil. A lot of more's here. And Sandeep, you get the products home, right? I'm thinking, are you seeing some differentiating trends? How have you seen business moving over the last few years?
Logistics. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, clear.
That's the most common line there these days. I'm stopping to use it. Can you hear me now? Oh, all right. So I think from banking to just picking on what Anil left, to energy, to chocolates, to logistics, we got to be the final mile guys. We don't offer a product but a service really in that sense. It's just an experience that we offer. So I mean, just to build on what the other speakers said before me, and just to add a few more numbers, and I think Anil said that the rate of acceleration, the rate of change moved up in the last 2 years. So quote an e-commerce example for that matter, the growth of e-commerce which happened in 8 years before pandemic happened, the same growth happened in the 3 months after the pandemic happened, right? And therefore, if you go to any social medium today, all of those mediums have embraced commerce, right? And if they have embraced commerce, that means that the marketers need to see that, right? I'll just go to B2B for a second. So this is a data point that 60 to 70% of decisions today, purchase decisions, are made even before the procurement people in B2B environment meet the prospective, let's say the prospective, the company whom they have to buy from. So there's no meeting. It's all happening because there's so much available digitally, right? So therefore, the exact words that Anil said, I have added a few numbers to it. The rate of acceleration moving to digital from a consumer standpoint has really been very, very fast. And this is reflected in the commerce moving through that medium. And therefore, I don't know what term he used the word never before. I think you've got to sell like never before. You've got to market like never before, because the consumer is like never before, right? He's really 10 years ahead now. And that's the change that we are grappling with, the innovation, the technology, the information available, there's loads of it moving around.
Thank you, Sandeep. Vasuta, over to you. You sort of seen different industries talk through. You are all about personalization at scale. So many journeys, customer journeys changing around. It has to be physical, digital world. How are you seeing it, and how are you sort of straddling this complicated arena, if I would say?
No, it's great that I get to speak at the end, right? Because I can actually, relate to some of the stuff that was talked about here. But I mean, to be honest, I think what we've seen, because we see, first of all, because we are mobile only, right? So we've seen a lot of data come onto the platform in the last 2 years, right? Which was completely unexpected and unanticipated, right? And I think that we talked about irreversibility, and we're actually seeing some of that through some of the data and, stats coming in. So I would say maybe, 2 or 3 areas where the consumer, at least behavior on a mobile is changed dramatically. And that could then potentially, bring about the changes in the customer journeys that, everyone talked about. I think one big one is definitely, on the commerce side, which Sandeep was referring to, that the kind of, engagement, the kind of downloads when it comes to commerce and hyper-local delivery, right? That we are seeing was through the roof in the first wave itself, right? We are not expected that that's the kind of shift we will see. But that was one big change, and it continued to last even when the first wave died down, and then through the course of the 24 months. And those numbers are actually sustaining now when we look at commerce as a category in terms of both user, app engagement, downloads, retention, all of that. So those numbers are holding. The second big one, which Ravi was referring to, we are seeing, fintech banking, right? This was a category, at least on our platform, we did not see as much of, you can say, activity, but all kinds of, sort of, I would say again, engagement in this, whether it is, wallets or, payment apps or, anything now, even, insurance tech, all kinds of products are seeing a massive adoption. And lastly, I think content consumption, and this I think has a huge implication for marketeers, is where are users spending their time when it comes to sort of their leisure time, their free time. We're seeing a lot of it go on one, gaming, which actually used to be small in India and has expanded dramatically, especially casual and hyper casual gaming, and of course OTT, right, which I think everyone's been talking about. So those are some of the shifts in at least consumer behaviors that we're seeing in the last 2 years, which could have an impact on some of the consumer journeys everyone talked about.
Vasuta, thank you. It takes me to the next topic around purpose, building sensitivity around purpose. And Anil, let me come to you. How are you sort of balancing this or strengthening the element around purpose, sensitivity around purpose, safety, hygiene as you go forward?
And, Harsha, by purpose, you do mean brand purpose, right?
Correct.
I think, as we've been discussing in the last few minutes, with the profusion of content on one side and the ability to kind of be distinctive and break clutter becoming more and more challenging. And on the other side, the opportunity to create a meaningful engagement with the consumer. I think those two elements are coming together. And when I think about a meaningful engagement, I guess you go back to what's core to you as a brand, what's your core brand proposition, and how you create an engagement platform which goes beyond just transaction, so that what the consumer is coming for is a meaningful piece of engagement. So I think that's where, we can use words like proposition, purpose, idea interchangeably. But at the heart of it is, the relationship of the brand with the consumer, allowing for an always-on meaningful engagement. I think that's what we see will provide long-term advantage. In the context of walled gardens, Harsha, efficiency is a race to the bottom. Unlikely that as we get to table stakes on data, table stakes on right for platform assets, kind of always on. All of that tech-enabled solutions will become table stakes. So the only thing that will help us drive competitive advantage is going to be this meaningful engagement with consumers. I think the beauty is the fact that it's no longer unidirectional broadcast messaging to all, but this notion of personalization that you are referring to, Harsha, I think that's what excites us a lot, because what it can offer and what we saw last year, for example, just as an example of what we did during Diwali last year, the ability to personalize at scale just creates so much more meaning that it's able to generate interest and engagement, resulting not just in brand equity, but also business much more effectively than before. That's the role that I see purpose playing. And I think that's where, balancing, what has historically meant very important to be clear about what your brand stands for and the kind of storytelling we do with it, and combining technology with it so that you can supercharge it in that sense going forward.
Thanks, Anil. Ravi, coming to you, Anil talked about understanding the brand, the purpose, and that's where I think the CMO also plays a critical role. There's always this question which when we meet people, that is the CMO supposed to be leading the digital transformation agenda, or does he understand enough of technology? But I think it's a very strong aspect from a brand purpose perspective. What are your views and thinking?
Yeah, I'll just remind myself 25 years back when we all started, the only data person we had was an MIS specialist, and then it became a power user. Today, I have a 60 people data science team. Okay, and we have platform specialists on Facebook and all. So as Anil was talking about, see, when mobile came as well as the internet came, we saw it as a screen. Here is another screen which consumers are spending, so we will broadcast messages. Then suddenly it became visible to all of us that you need to engage also, because it gives you the opportunity to engage. And lucky for India, I've been saying this, most of us are also engineers, somehow or other. It happens to be like that in that country. So we have that big advantage of understanding that kind of technology side. Today, I see this as having two sides of the brain coming together. The max and the magic has to come in, the madness has to come in, the max has to come in, and then you can create magic. So if you do not understand the tech, and say, as Anil was saying, like, what does the purpose do, for example, it's allow us to have a meaningful conversation. And we have simply very clearly said, what is our brand as a bank promise to the customers is purely to remove the complexity of money, the financial decisions from your life. We are better prepared to manage your financial decisions. We are better prepared to guide you, enable you, and tell you what are the options in front of you. That earlier was only happening through a physical conversation. Now, technology allowed us to go ahead and do it on a one-on-one basis. And the bigger advantage is we have a big first-party data available. Now, if you have a first-party data available, which is what your transactions are available with the bank, now, for me, the table stake is without personalization, you don't have the right to sit in this chair. It may not be true for many other industries where you may not have the first party data. But for a banking BFSI kind of a sector where you have so much of first party data, if you do not marry that to your purpose, and say when you're saying that purpose is to enable making better financial choices today and tomorrow, how do you bring that data? How do you bring that ability to tell stories and then put everything in a continuum in terms of whatever you do? Are you going to make consumers feel good about the fact that they are taking better financial choices? Similarly, when we do festive treats during the Diwali season, we never go ahead and say like, hey, here is a bouquet of offers. Since we know what you spend on, where do you spend on, we actually curate the offers for you, and which is extremely relevant. And you see the engagement shooting up because it's a meaningful conversation. So if the CMO is not going to do it, I don't know who else is going to do it. Because at the end of the day, you are supposed to be tasked, and you are tasked to actually reach out to the consumers. You are tasked to actually make the consumers feel good about the brand, also bring business, as Anil was talking about. Today, I call myself a revenue marketer because our contribution to revenue is directly measurable. And once we create the journeys, why can't I sell a product? Today, we contribute to a large amount of business in the bank today.
Ravi, thank you. And Bidisha, coming over to you, Ravi said it very wonderfully. If the CMO is not going to do it, who is? So what's your view here in terms of CMOs leading or being the center of the full digital transformation in our firms?
Yeah, again, I go back to my category, which is slightly unique. It is about energy management. It is about, now, if you look at the products that we are selling, right? We are selling those products which nobody wants to look at, right? It's those electrical panels sitting in our basements. They're not pretty products, right? We are talking about distribution boards. When you come into the house, you're always trying to hide distribution boards with a painting or whatever, right? So we are selling all these products, but at the end of the day, what is sitting on top of the products is life-changing of the planet, right? So just purely selling the products without a layer of storytelling of the purpose actually has no meaning for us, right? So in our kind of business, all the more communicating, the brand purpose, communicating the fact that every action of yours is lighting up 20 villages of India, or is handing over a better planet to the next generation, is very, very important for us. I mean, at Schneider, our mission, vision, whatever you call it, is about making the most of your energy, enabling our customers to make the most of the energy. For us especially, it is not about selling the product. That is something that another team does. But as marketeers, we are trying to weave a dream. We are trying to, weave a story. In fact, quite recently, as all of us are talking about the government of India, COP26, save the planet, do something, we actually launched a very interesting initiative called the Green Yodha. like I said, our target audience is sitting from electricians to CEOs and everybody in between. We looked at a central binder of a storytelling, which actually engages the customer, saying, it's not just a one-way story, but what can I do? There's a two-way engagement that we're talking about, and that's through the Green Yotha program, which is everybody can play a role in sustainability to save the planet, right? So all the more in my category, Harsha, supporting what Ravi and Anil said, for us, storytelling is sitting on top of those very ugly products, which I really can't showcase, in communication, but I can showcase a great story that people can embrace towards buying our products.
Yeah, thank you, Bidisha. And let me go to Vasuta. I won't give you the last chance this time after hearing everyone. But if I were to ask you and say, you as a platform, how do you see it panning out from a purpose perspective? Is there a lens you also adopt when we're engaging with clients? What is your thinking here?
Absolutely. I think, Harsha, for us, the primary thing, is around elements of data privacy, right? See, because as a platform, we obviously have access to, especially because users are on their mobile, right? So by virtue of us being a platform, there are a lot of data signals that we get or use, especially for meeting all the marketer use cases around targeting, around personalization, around powering some of the data science and AI engines and so on. So a big component for us in the last 2 years around this whole element has been around data privacy and how do we respect user rights when it comes to data privacy. Also because we operate sort of a global engine, right? So we've had to obviously go and comply with laws, for example, in Europe for GDPR, in the US for CCPA, right? A lot of those things which ensure that, at all times, whatever data we are collecting, processing or using is keeping user rights in mind. So I think that's a big part of our charter when it comes to, purpose and some of those things. And then making sure that we are playing the right role between our clients, which is marketers and advertisers, and the end users. So that's a big part for us.
Thank you, Vasuta. And Sandeep, over to you on the next question. That when we look at CMO as the center of digital transformation, I know the logistics industry has also sort of taken huge measures over the last year or two. How are you seeing this? Are you in person playing a very active role, or is it still evolving the industry in terms of the CMO versus other people who may claim to be the digital transformation gurus, I would say?
So I learned from Vasuta that I need to speak up, right? So my first speak up is that you've got to change the sequence of asking questions. I'm in the last now. All right. So if you don't mind, I have a certain take on the purpose question you asked, right? And I'll step back a bit on that, on purpose. Then you said purpose, hygiene, and safety, if I remember the words right. So purpose, the way I look at it from an organization perspective, not really sitting in the CMO chair, is what underpins the raison d'etre, the reason of existence of the organization. Purpose binds the organization, across functions. Purpose communicates to the external world of what do you stand for? What is your reason of existence? And therefore, for example, and it's got to be simple, powerful, and maybe a lot of organizations may take it for granted, but it's all pervasive, right? It's so powerful. For instance, in DHL, our purpose is connecting people and improving lives. Connecting people and improving lives. Now, if I'm sitting inside DHL and I look at, hey, you know what? I am connecting people and improving lives. It's so powerful. And when I communicate the same externally, and the external world looks at me, hey, DHL is connecting people and improving. We are enabling global trade. We're improving lives, right? So therefore, it's very fundamental. And if as a marketer, I don't understand, I need to understand it and communicate it as much as I can. That's my core job. Now, I'll link the hygiene and safety bits now. What's happening in today's world is there are three things that you really need to be scared about, and it's while purpose is underpinning, but the three monsters you need to be scared about are compliance, cybersecurity, and safety. And I'm bringing the hygiene and safety thinking, right? And compliance topples organizations globally. Safety, and today organizations are talking about safety first. The CEO starts his presentation, the first slide he presents is about safety. How will he live safety first if the first slide is not about safety? You have a meeting, there's a person who comes and does a safety briefing. Therefore, safety is a part of life. But if safety becomes a standard operating procedure, is it enough? If you talk in the beginning of the meeting, is it enough? No, you got to stand on top of the roof and keep talking about it. Yes. And which is the fourth thing that I said, three things: compliance, cybersecurity, and safety. And by the way, before I go to the fourth thing, DHL in India is in the top 3 most attacked companies in terms of cyber in the, let's say, last 12 to 18 months. So we understand what it means really. And therefore, on top of compliance, cybersecurity, and safety, the fourth thing which you can completely kill you is complacency about these 3 things, right? And today, when organizations are trying to sort of go ahead on the learning curve on the ESG framework, and when your consumers and your shareholders are looking at you on how you measure up on the ESG framework, these hygiene, safety, compliance, cybersecurity, you've got to talk about it internally and of course externally, because that builds trust on your brand. And therefore, if you're conceptually clear about what is it that you mean, what is it you stand for, what is tomorrow for your organization, then these become ideas and thoughts that as marketers you need to bring to life. And when you're bringing them to life, it impacts everybody internally and externally. And then to your question on CMO's part in digital transformation, I'll again give a conceptual answer on this. And we talk about digitalization everywhere. The fact is that the new generation, my kids, are way smarter than I am in terms of their adoption to the digital medium, right? And therefore, in my workforce, there are people of all ages and of all calibers. And therefore, while the reverse mentoring is happening and you need to gather their ideas, you see, insights of different quality are coming from different people. The new generation is bringing insights of an absolutely different quality. But from a digitalization standpoint, let me build on the insight point. So therefore, insights are coming at all levels. The fact is that at times in organizations, you depend on folks who talk the digital lingo far better. You know what, these guys sounds so much of rocket science. I bet he'll make up something good for you. But there is always a good room for executive insight. So the rule, so what is the role that the CMO is playing in the whole digitalization journey? So the role that the CMO is playing is, A, he has to be aware that, he cannot vacate that space of executive insight because only he brings the executive insight. And B, he has to be very, very digitally savvy, because if knowledge is power, learning is superpower, right? So as long as we as CMOs are constantly evolving, and while we are conceptually sound, but learning and arming ourselves with these digital tools and realizing that, look, there are folks out there who can reverse mentor us, but you know what? There's an executive insight which we need to fill up. Otherwise, the story will never be strong, right? So I think that's the role that the CMOs have to perform in the digital transformation.
Sandeep, wonderfully taught about learning. Bidisha, coming over to you, how do you see when you're looking at innovation and experience? There are obviously ROI questions which are coming around. Our technology teams talk about it's a technology-based stuff. Is it going to be, how are you going to justify XYZ done by the market? How do you handle that kind of a dilemma or discussion in the boardroom?
I think, I think marketing as a function to a large extent, I would say has evolved, has in some cases have branched out to many. I mean, when I started off back in advertising on the Unilever account, and then after that on Unilever, there was no Popcom separate and, digital marketing separate. And the brand manager would literally be the custodian of the entire interaction, right? And then after that, we've seen marketing kind of take different sub-segments, etc. But what hasn't changed over the years is a return on investment, right? Today, I like to, whenever I talk about brand, I like to talk about brand business. I don't think brand by itself, or I don't believe in brand campaigns, honestly, anymore. It is about brand business campaign, right? Which is what is the every single expenditure that we are incurring. And again, I can talk more from a B2B standpoint, needs to have a strong measurement. If I can't measure something, then I just don't do it. I mean, I know there are lots and lots of conversations I have to, my team challenges me all the time saying, oh, you're more of a new age marketeer, and what happened to all your, so at the end of the day, if you have to show the business or show the company or it is about taking care of your shareholders. It's taking care of what you bring to the table from a business standpoint. Now, today, the good thing is there are tools. There are tools to measure everything, right? Even if it's a corporate campaign, it can be very easily measured in terms of the impact you're making. And that sometimes the impact may not necessarily lead to a direct sale, but in our business, we're constantly looking at the pipeline, right? We're constantly looking at top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, and the movement within the funnel. So to answer your question, there is no brand building without business building, right? Both go hand in hand. Depends on whether you're in the B2C stream or the B2B stream. Like I said, in our business, we do both. But essentially, measurement of impact to final revenues is something that it's non-negotiable as far as our business is concerned. Our pipeline is something that the marketing organization continuously looks at. In fact, we have stand-up meetings twice a week to see what is the health of the pipeline and what we need to do, because in our kind of business, the lead time of decision making is very, very long, right? So what happens in the top of the funnel in the beginning of the year may culminate into business only after 12 months. So very clearly, I think today brand and business go hand in hand, and there's, at least the way we look at it, is that it's not negotiable.
Thanks, Bidisha. Anil, brand and business going together, and Mondelez also is known for a lot of innovation. How do you plan to get more and more innovation and justify, I guess, that that's the right kind of digital approach to take for the firm?
I think maybe worth breaking up the question into two parts. I think the point around ROI, I think, and that's a broad commentary on the CEO, CFO, CMO dynamic that you're referring to. I think as long as there is clarity on why we are doing what we are doing, I guess then things fall into place. And if you start from the consumer, you know where the consumer is, right? It's not about why am I doing this, it's about how do I measure what I'm doing. So I think that clarity falling into place for a consumer-centric organization, then it becomes very clear that I need, because we've been in the industry long enough and seen fair enough, large number of people worried about measurement and the lack of, etc., etc. And using that to justify why we shouldn't participate. And I think there are a few of us who've chosen to say, lack of measurement can't be the reason why we can't participate. Let's go where the consumer is and then find ways to measure. If it so means that we need to collaborate and find ways to measure, we'll find ways to measure. And over a period of time, we have found our ways to measure. We're large enough advertisers and we can build the ecosystem around measurement. So I think that solves the part around ROI. So it's no longer a situation where, there's a dynamic where the CMO is having to justify investment. As again, saying that, as Ravi put it, we are revenue marketers. To that extent, we believe that we will drive business through the marketing that we do. So that's one part of the question. The other part is, I think, interesting for we all know, right? We are not F enough in our FMCG, right? And that's, we're seeing in the startup environment and in the digital space, there are lots that we can learn in terms of going fast in the area of innovation. And that's a completely new domain that data and digital is kind of spurring. Kind of the agile ways of working that's become kind of par for course for tech and startup. And how do we bring that notion into our business is the biggest area of transformation that we're working on. How can we reduce speed to market? How can we get much more agile in the way we develop our products? How can we make it a little bit more two-way? How can we do far more test and learns? And hence reduce speed to market, co-create, kind of take a beta approach. We've never had that kind of an approach, right? We were like, we'll test to eternity and launch a final product. So how do we change that notion? Is a big change. We're realizing that it's not just about a KPI around speed to market and responding, or so-called feeling that we are as fast as a startup, but it's really about building on our strengths and yet leveraging technology so that we can move faster in the area of innovation. The other element is around, of course, data and insight, and how we can use, again, Ravi mentioned this in the past around, how do we leverage really core data science to listen to consumer signals and then convert that into meaningful insight. That's again an interesting challenge. You get large volumes of data. And I think the early learnings over the last few years has been that we can get immensely excited about really insignificant things. So how do we identify what's meaningful and then move behind it? I think those are some of the areas around innovation that's making life very interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Anil. And I come to Sandeep now. How do you, Sandeep, are there any learnings that you had? You mentioned about a lot of activity at DHL last 2 years. Any learnings you had as CMOs continue to spearhead this digital transformation? Is there something which people may have to learn from you?
So, step back a bit earlier bit for a second, Harsha. I love the fact that Ravi has 60 folks who are massaging data for him, and I'm sure, as Anil said, if you look at a lot of data, data starts telling you that I'm significant. These are important. These are good learnings that I've had today in this forum. Yeah, but okay. So, and if I may make a comment on the innovation, I think somewhere as leaders in our organization, we've got to think about innovation in two paradigms. One is disruptive, and you don't disrupt every day, and the other is it's on the continuum, which is continuous improvement. Right? So if somebody asks me, which is the superhero I idolize, I often say it's Iron Man, because his suit improves every time he comes back on the screen. Right? So that's innovation for me, is continuous improvement, and then how is it that we are adopting it as a way of life on a daily basis? And there are methods that the organizations can live to make innovation as a part of your daily life, right? And then coming to, and I'm not building on that, I would have loved to, but coming to the point that you were saying, that you were saying is, are there any learnings on what has not worked, right? So I think the learning that and from a logistics standpoint, look, when things stopped around the world, the need for logistics companies really, really shot up. Because we were making, when e-commerce was happening, and when I don't know if Anil or talked about buying from a Big Basket, right? Or somebody else talked about buying from Big Basket. But when everybody was buying from Big Basket and e-commerce was growing multifold, the logistics companies were making the bridge, right, between what you wanted and what had to get delivered to you. Therefore, I think it was extremely testing time for us in the last 2 years. Business went ballistic, and we also had to deploy the social distancing and the COVID appropriate behavior in our supply chain, right? In our terminals, when we are loading containers on the aircraft, or when we are packing shipments, etc. Okay, so but in between all that, I think the timeless concept of learning, and at any time it gets tested. And I'll quote Warren Buffett on this. Warren Buffett says the difference, and I'm reading it out right now, the difference between successful people and very successful people. The difference between successful people and very successful people is that the very successful people say no to almost everything. So I think it's, for me, as things come to our table and as we want to attend to everything, I think the learning for me, and the more and more discerning I think we've got to get, I don't know, I'm still on the continuum, is that how do we separate the wheat from the chaff? How do we prioritize that these are the three things that I, as a leader of my organization, has to really focus on, while defocusing on the other things. So I think that learning is timeless. And in this madness in the last 2 years that we've been through, and I think as an organization, we really stood through it and come out shining. That learning is something I've really built on. Right? That's my comment.
Thank you, Sandeep. On the ET team, I just a hint. I think we see double pictures of some of the panel members. If you could just look at that, because I know Ravi had bumped off. I don't know what had happened, but do make the changes at the back end as we come back to Ravi, because I can't see him still. Vasuta, over to you on any learnings from your side to share as companies embark on the journey. They've approached you for campaigns. You've been working with them. Any learnings you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I think, Harsha, we've seen, when it comes to innovation, especially on mobile, I think we've seen a lot of that on two dimensions. I think one, especially on the data side, right? I think the way brands are starting to use data now, right? Especially, I think in the last 12 to 18 months, some of the use cases of personalization, of segmentation and targeting, right? Of usage, for example, in real-time analytics, real-time intelligence, right? All of those, I think, have been very, very powerful. In fact, I've been seeing that a lot of the work that's been done at an India level has been winning at an Asia Pacific level, because a lot of that work is, very unique and cutting edge. So I think a lot of innovation is happening on that dimension of data. Second, I think, which not a lot of people talked about, is around the side of creatives, and I think the creativity, especially which is coming on mobile, I think has been amazing, because I think maybe till a few years back, people were repurposing creatives from other media for mobile. But now what's happened is people are actually making creatives for each platform, in fact, right? So I think the kind of, again, innovation that's coming on this side, right? And for every new platform as well, right? Whether it is short form videos, whether it is influencer marketing, right? Whether it is social commerce, as these new formats are evolving, we are seeing a lot of, again, creativity happening on the creative asset side. So I think both of these dimensions, a lot of powerful and unique stuff that we've seen in the last couple of, I would say, months and even quarters.
Thank you, Vasuta. Ravi, we see you now, and coming to you around the whole area around learnings. You did mention a host of people working with you around data analytics. Any specific learnings which would be interesting for the audience here, which you experienced over the last year or so?
The one key learning over the last year, I wouldn't say the last 3 years, 4 years, has been that there is no one way of doing things. I think that's the biggest learning that we all have got. And multiple people will come with multiple stories from the insights which they come from the data. Multiple platforms people will say will work. So the whole purpose of what we have been trying to do is how do we create a learning agility in the organization, which takes whatever is the input coming from, say, an analytics team, which is purely mathematics and data science team, marry it with a technology-led storytelling, as we call it, to have meaningful conversations and drive revenues. How can you quickly measure it? And this strategic agility to keep doing multiple tests. Today, we have technology investments which allows us to test. You do it in the morning, by afternoon, you get to know whether it is working or not, 10% on this, 90% on the regular stuff. So how do you create learning agility in the organization has been the biggest learning for all of us. And the more you create that, you are able to do multiple ways of doing things and then pick out the winner and then move on. We do creative testing on almost like, who's the customer? Is the target segment right? Is the target segment, is the right product proposition? Is the right value proposition being matched? Then is the right value proposition being conveyed in the right messaging? Then is the right messaging is being done in the right channel? Is it being run at the right time, the context? So all these things can be tested. And that's the advantage the technology provides to all of us today. And how do we actually make it as a practice? So the premium is on learning agility. The premium is on making it work on a daily basis. And how do we actually measure and quickly learn and adapt and change? And I think that's the biggest learning that we all have learned, that you don't have to worry. And I keep telling everybody, there is no hippo in the room. Highest paid person's opinion doesn't count anymore. You have data to prove it, whether your view is right. And there is no God. Consumer is the God. You have a view. She has a view. Both of you go to the market in an A/B test and come back in the evening and you take a call yourself. You don't have to come to us. You don't have to go to anybody. I think that's the power that today's marketeers have. And the way you leverage is all about creating that learning agility in the organization. That's the biggest learning.
Thank you, Ravi, around learning agility. And now I just come back to the last round to all the panelists as we try and look to close. I'll come to all of you one by one around one or two things that you would have to tell organizations starting this journey very early in the journey, and look forward to experience folks like you guiding them. So maybe one or two things. And let me start off with Sandeep, as he's been talking about becoming last, but let's start off with him and then to Vasuta.
So I think very simple stuff actually, and stays timeless. Be yourself, and stay ahead of the game. Communicate with your customers, understand their needs, and be 360. Omni-channel. Somebody said it's only one channel. And in today's world, active use of technology, and I'll fill in the concept on that I want to talk about, which is on innovations, aka continuous improvement. And I see both of them in the same paradigm. And what happens is, that, and this is where I'll bring the concept of design thinking in, that what happens is that very often we understand the problems from our consumers, or internal or external, and then we translate these problems into solutions. But what we're doing is that there is a medium in between. So there is a problem identification, and that medium is your brain, and you translate the problem in the way that your brain tells you, and then you put a solution. But I think more and more, as we are going ahead in the future, the concept of design thinking is that when you define the problem, are you keeping the stakeholder, could be a consumer or internal, etc., in the problem definition? When you define the solution, are you keeping those stakeholders in that solution definition? And therefore, as you develop solutions and products, please involve the external stakeholders as well as internal stakeholders in the whole process of design. And that's when beautiful solutions come out. I think that's the next step that we have to move to, that we not only trust what our brain tells us that we've understood, but also involve those folks whom your solution is going to impact. And these are the timeless solutions that we've got to build in the future.
Thank you, Sandeep. And Vasuta, over to you. 2 learnings for organizations starting off this journey.
So I think maybe, earlier when Ravi was talking about it, I think it's very important for any organization who's starting off to understand that, one solution or, one size does not fit all on this journey. I think a lot of organizations think of, bringing in a lot of, big systems and processes and tools in from the start without understanding, say, their own business or use cases or, user base well. So I think it's important to do that and then embark on this journey of transformation, and not just go by what's just available and what others are doing. And I think the second probably I would say is, I think it's important on this journey to learn and fail fast, right? Again, referring to maybe the learning agility point that Ravi was talking about, is I think failing early is very important before you've embarked on a path where you've gone down, made big investments, right, for 12, 18 months in certain technologies, certain systems, and then you realize it's not working out in the way you wanted. So I think learning and failing fast before you get into huge investments is again important for any organization to embarking on this journey. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you for the fail fast angle. Bidisha, your industry very different from the others. Anything that you would like to share for newly embarked candidates here?
Yeah, I think 2 things, if I can just crystallize my thoughts. One is, for this kind of transformation, it's very, very important to have internal stakeholder alignment. Because quite often we see that the marketing organization is doing something else, and the rest of the organization is like very polarized, right? So I think it's very important to get internal stakeholder alignment and sort of run at the same pace. Number 2 is especially for my kind of industry, one key learning is that we may be B2B, we may be selling those dirty panels, etc., but the strongest connection with customers, consumers happen through storytelling. That's what we've seen in the past. Straight from your heart reaches the heart concept actually works very, very strongly in the B2B business. So these two thoughts.
Thank you, Bidisha. Wonderfully said. Anil, coming over to you, while we pick up learnings, there's also this whole angle around what you should not do if it's a new organization embarking on this journey. So maybe I flip it around, and instead of learning, you want to pick up learnings, you can pick up that, or you can pick up what you cannot do, what you should not do. Either one's okay with us.
Yeah, I mean, I was preparing for those two things, and I can just flip the way I'm framing the sentence so that it can be framed as what you shouldn't do. I think what you definitely shouldn't do is assume that there are going to be a bunch of experts who are going to do this for you. And I think in the context of marketing and technology, I think our belief is that every marketer has to be a digital marketer. So there isn't going to be a small set of a digital marketing experts who are going to do it for you. Everybody has to upgrade that capability. And we're hearing that it's not individuals, but the entire. So capability is going to be a big one. So do not assume that you can buy capability. You need to build and you need to invest in it. I think the second point is do not rely only on your own organization. Increasingly, more and more, it's about the ecosystem that you work in and how you're able to build a future-ready ecosystem and kind of develop those new partnerships. And we are realizing that more and more that's kind of a little bit of the gray hair talking that, more partners who know us and our business better and are also out there from a technology standpoint. Vasuta and her businesses, for example, one just example. So people are out there, but then bringing them into the ecosystem. So it's getting a bit more complex for the marketers, especially. It's no longer one agency, about 5, 6, 7 specialists that you need to work with. How do you create that ecosystem and nurture that ecosystem in service of the business is the second thing that's important. You can't rely only on what you've had in the past in your own organizational strength alone, and you need to build that ecosystem. So those are the two things that possibly I would say, Harsha.
Thank you, Anil. Ravi, over to you. Anil mentioned very clearly about the ecosystem and the fact that everyone's a digital marketer. So let me take you to the second question. What should people not do? What should people not do? Maybe 2 or 3 suggestions around that.
The first thing, Harsha, if I have to summarize my thoughts as well as what I heard from everybody, what you should not do is expect an investment to be done today and then thinking that everything will magically happen tomorrow. I think the biggest realization that we all have had over the last many years is this is a journey, and many people don't realize that this is a journey. So don't expect point solutions to happen. It will not happen. So don't look at it as a point solution that this will work. That's not the one to do. What Anil told, I just want to flip it around a little bit. He said, create the ecosystem. My view is to learn from the ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, you are a big participant and there are so many people, whether it is Vasuta, whether it is Sandeep, whether it is Bidisha, every organization is trying to do a lot. And we are also having a lot of people from multiple organizations. We work with multiple agencies. How can you quickly learn from this ecosystem and replicate and adapt for yourself? Rather than creating something out of innovation, saying that, no, we will do something new. Obviously, you understand your customer. You understand your value prop to your customer. Your storytelling is obviously yours, but all the technology use cases that you see, all the investments other people do, there's a huge amount of ecosystem learning that we do. So please do take care of it and don't assume that, oh, I will go ahead and talk to 2 vendors and then they will bring me the solution, it will happen. So these are the 2 things that we have learned. Realize it's a journey. Don't expect a point solution to give you all the stuff, and don't just go with 1 or 2. Do multiple ecosystem partnerships and learn from that and replicate. And what will work and what will not work, you get to know anyway in a matter of weeks or maybe a day today in this world. So if you can do that, I think and the learning agility in an organization is there, you're able to do it much, much faster. And finally, I will want to always leave it with all this stuff. And this is the biggest challenge that I always face nowadays. I keep telling everybody data, insights, data science, digital marketing platforms, all of this is fine. But there is a flesh and blood behind that. The customer that you're talking to is a human. So please, please, please use the mind, but appeal to the hearts. Rational decision-making does not happen. Emotional decision-making happens. So don't show me data. Also, please tell me how the consumer would feel after all this stuff. So that we should never lose sight of.
Thank you, Ravi. Really like the one around learning from the ecosystem. And I've learned a lot from all you panel members as I've heard you speaking around. I'm sure the audience also has done a lot. I'd like to give a big round of applause and thank you to Ravi, yourself, Bidisha, Vasuta, Anil, and Sandeep. Thank you for being such wonderful panel members, making my life very, very easy. Have a great day.
Thank you, Harsha.
Thank you.
Great day to everyone. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Nathan, were you wanting to summarize?
Thank you again, Harsha. Indeed, that was very, very insightful. Thank you to all our speakers. It was lovely listening to all of you over the last 1 hour plus, and so much to seek from. And as marketeers, you have given so much more reflection to many of them who are watching us. So thank you so very much indeed. All right, so let's jump into what's up next. Well, it's only getting better with every single hour. Up next, innovating the market's role in current times. Up next.